I'm Josh Mosqueira. I am the game director on Reaper of Souls.
And I'm Brian Kindregan, the lead writer on Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls.
No one can stop death.
So when we started thinking about what Reaper of Souls means to us, we really focused on sort of three core pillars. The first one is epic heroes, right? We really wanted to make sure that whether you're playing the barbarian or the brand new crusader, that you really felt like you're this bigger than life character, right? And we have some great new additions to the existing classes. Everybody gets a new skill. But I think at the core of the experience is, I'll let you talk about Malthael in a second, but really focusing on the promise of epic loot, that we really wanted to make sure that finding items in-game is the most rewarding, the most satisfying way of finding those items. So we've done a lot of changes in terms of how loot works in the game, something we call Loot 2.0, and it just boils down to we want to make sure we're dropping less, but better, and more epic legendaries.
Another big thing is our villain. Obviously, Diablo games are about the villain. And something that Josh says a lot is how Malthael, the idea of the Angel of Death, was this sort of lightning rod that kind of gathered all of the feelings that we wanted to get into the game into one idea. And as soon as Malthael was clearly our villain, and we understood kind of who he was and where he was coming from and what his vibe was, I think it just sort of crystallized a lot of other things about the game for us, and that in turn kind of informed, the feel of the city of Westmarch and the feel of the haunted apocalypse, that with people being chased down in the streets and killed, and the kind of grim, creepy vibe, that the entire game should have. So I would say it will have more of a death-themed palette, more so than angelic. I think. Which would be, gray and dark blues, very cool colors. Not as vibrant. I think Act 4 of Diablo 3 had a very angelic palette, and this is a grim, dark, gritty, gothic. Wow, I need more words that begin with G. This is a very dark and gothic sort of feel to this story. And so even you go to a number of different locations, but all of them each has their own flavor, but they do sort of have this unifying palette that makes you feel like you're in one story.
So in terms of what can players expect for the end game for Reaper of Souls, one of our core philosophies behind Reaper of Souls was this end game for everyone. And we want to give our players as many different options to how they play Reaper of Souls. So obviously you can have the awesome story experience. I hear that Brian's worked really hard on. We have a great, Act 5, you're taking on Malthael, the Angel of Death. But we're also introducing what we call Adventure Mode. And an Adventure Mode is a brand new way to play Diablo 3. It's essentially it opens up the whole world of Sanctuary. You have this great map. You'll be able to sort of jump into any area of the game. And you'll be doing two main things when you're playing Adventure Mode. You'll be completing bounties, which are dynamically generated objectives. So every act has, between 3 to 5 of these bounties. And every time you complete a bounty, you're going to be getting some great rewards. And one of those rewards are what we call keystones, the Rift keystones. And that allows you to open up a Nephilim Rift. What the Nephilim Rift is, it's a short, 1 to 10 level dungeon that is totally randomly generated. From the monsters, to the layout, to the lighting and the weather effects, and to the boss at the end. And again, you defeat the boss and you'll be getting some pretty epic loot.
In terms of the Crusader class's, story and background, I think one big challenge we had was that they are evocative of the Paladins, and we definitely wanted players to feel that connection, but we wanted them to also feel like their own new class, right? You shouldn't feel like you're just playing a Paladin with a different name. So in terms of the background, one of the big things was that the Paladin order had fallen to corruption, or they had discovered that there was corruption at the heart of their order. And so we created the Crusaders as a group that had split off from the Zakarum faith long ago, not as a schism, but that they had gone off on a secret mission, basically, to try to find the source of the corruption and find a way to cure the corruption of the Zakarum faith. And so they've been out in the wilderness for 200 or 300 years, and no one's heard of them. And meanwhile, the Paladins formed into the Paladin Order and went west and had all of their adventures. And now the Crusaders sort of come rolling out of the wilderness, hundreds of years later, and they represent the true Zakarum faith as it stood back then. And so they come back and discover their, the origin of their faith, that the Travancore, the central city, has fallen to ruin, and that the faith is a shambles. And so they're coming upon a whole new scene, and they're bringing their own values and their sort of original Zakarum light powers with them.
The core fantasy of the Crusader is this knight in battle-scarred armor, right? We really wanted to sort of play off of the Paladin from D2, and here Brian can give you a little bit more detail in terms of like how we evolved the Paladin into the Crusader. But from a gameplay role, what we wanted to do is create a melee character, right? You have this big guy with a shield and the armor and the flail, but we also wanted to give him a range component. We wanted to make sure that he's the kind of character that can dominate up close and mid-range as well. And that really opened up a very interesting gameplay space for them, because for the 5 existing classes, we have some very well-defined melee classes like the Barbarian and the Monk. We also have some great range classes with like the Demon Hunter and the Wizard. So the Crusader fills this really awesome niche that allows the players to cycle the game style. So you can go up and smash things in the face, and then you call in the heavens themselves to help sort of rain sort of righteous wrath on the battlefield. I think for the last year, it's something we really discussed a lot. As Mike said in the opening ceremonies, we really believed that we had the best of intentions with the auction house. We wanted to provide players with a safe and convenient and a secure way of trading items, and we were totally blindsided by the effect it had on the game. We always thought there'd be a small percentage of players who would use the auction house, but the fact that there was a button on the front end meant that a lot of players just naturally gravitated to the auction house. And that really ended up sort of working against the core reward loop of what Diablo is all about. I mean, Diablo is a game about fighting monsters, finding that epic loot, and just that very simple reward structure. And the auction house totally short-circuited. So, over the last year, we've been sort of looking at it, asking ourselves, is the intent still the right one? And about 2 months ago, we were in a meeting, and they asked me, so Josh, what do you think the right thing to do? And I said, I think we should remove the auction house. I think it's the right thing to do for the game. And a big credit to Mike and all the other all our executives. They all are gamers. They all play the games. They all understand what the core promise of a game like Diablo is, and they were totally supportive in the decision. So in a span of 20 minutes, everybody agreed that it's probably the right thing to do. So it's a little terrifying, to be honest, but it's we're really happy we are where we are right now.